And so it's my pleasure to be with Varun here, who is building Hibachi, which is a perp private perp stacks on Celestia. But Varun, why don't you introduce yourself and Hibachi?
Absolutely. Hey guys, this is Varun here. I'm one of the co-founders of Hibachi, which is a perps exchange built as a sovereign rollup on Celestia, or ZK sovereign rollup, I reckon. So we can talk more about it, but the idea is that you can have a really fast performant exchange that doesn't disclose your positions to anybody, right? And you can do all the degenerate things you already do, but now no one can tell. So that's the...
Yeah. So I think maybe to start, it's I think of Hibachi and actually a lot of the other teams that spoke earlier today that are building on Celestia as a really good example of what it means to build and take advantage of like building a full stack app and tapping into the kind of scale as far as like block space and like transaction volume that an L1 like Celestia uniquely enables. And so maybe to start with, let's talk about like, what is it about being a rollup on Celestia that like enables Hibachi to, provide a different kind of user experience, or, provide different kind of features that other perp stacks previously couldn't? Because I'll say I've used Hibachi, and what's remarkable is it just feels like you're using Binance. Like it literally, you deposit your money, same thing, like there's a deposit, address that you send stuff to. You have the money, and then you can like open up these markets, trade with leverage, and everything's instantaneous. So yeah, it feels almost like a sign. It doesn't feel like you're on chain. So anyway, yeah, tell us about like what features do you guys tap into that is uniquely enabled by being a roll-up and being on Celestia?
Actually, I'm glad you say that, because I think when we started building it and designing it, one of the key things that we wanted to do was make sure that a user cannot tell like what's, it's an on-chain app or it's a roll-up or any of that, right? So they should not be able to tell anything about the infra that is being used. They should just go and use it as any other product that they would be using, right? So, and I think Celestia is like a pretty elegant architecture in the sense that it enables you to do anything, and you can pretty much make everything abstract, and a user would never even know what's going on, right? So, in the context of building an exchange, there is like 3 things that matter to us the most, right? So, the first thing is the venue performant? Can the users do whatever they like, the way they would like it to do? Or, can they trade at like sub-millisecond latency? Can they have access to fills, buys, and anything, instantly without having to wait for block confirmation times, things like that, right? So, how do you build a more user-centric experience when building an exchange, right? So that's the first tenet. The second one is obviously when you do these things, making sure that your activities are not public to anyone.
Yep.
Right? Because if you look at most L1s where people build, any action you take, like it's broadcasted and everyone can see the action, right? So, which is good and bad. Like in a way you can say it's transparent, you can track every activity, but then if you are like a high frequency trader or a hedge fund or somebody else who is actually doing like serious volume, you don't want your strategies to be exposed to the public, to the world, or things you're doing. You want them to be more private.
Your liquidation price shouldn't be broadcast.
I mean, liquidity price is one, right? So also think, if you like, let's say jump.
You can like back and reverse engineer what their strategy is.
Exactly.
Then, like create your own like algorithm to like screw them over.
Exactly. So if you have a fund that is spending like hours of compute time and proprietary trading, development hours just to build these strategies, you don't want people to reverse engineer that just from looking at trading data, right? That's one of the big ones. So those are the 2 from more user-centric. And the last thing is probably one of the most important things, is how do you prevent FTX from happening?
Yep.
Okay, if the exchange were to stop functioning the way it is intended to, can the users exit without anyone's permission, right? So if you can check these 3 boxes, then you have what you call, like, you can call it decentralized, or you have like
a verifiable exchange,
a provable exchange, or verifiable, right? So basically you're saying is you don't need to centralize, decentralize. That is just a word salad at that point, right? So what we really care about is can a user have a really good performance? Can they keep their transactions private? And do they have exit guarantees in the off chance that things go wrong, right? So, and if you meet those criteria, then you pretty much have what you would expect from a decentralized platform, right? So, and I think Celestia, by enabling you to compute any way you like and only providing the DA, it's like a gift, right? So you can just do that very easily, right? So I think that's one of the reasons why, like, it's a very elegant design. It's kind of like you took Bitcoin in many ways. It's like really, really simple, but then it does what it does really, really well, right? So which is store the right data and then make sure that it's available for anyone to reproduce a state to exit as needed. And then otherwise you just build an off-chain app.
So you said it extremely well, but so the 3 points were, one were like user experience things like latency, and I also think that another thing is like fees. I'll talk about that in a second. The last one was about the verifiability. What was the second one again?
So I said like basically performance, privacy.
Privacy, right.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's go through each one of those and talk about how Celestia enables this, right? So on the performance part, and also so the reason why I think confirmation, there's 2 reasons why it's important to have a fast, low latency exchange. The first is just for those of us who've been around since, the early days of crypto and DeFi summer, you would, place your trade and on Uniswap, and it would take, a long ass time to go through, and you just wait, and then it'd be confirmed, and all of a sudden the tokens in your wallet. It's just a bad user experience. But then once you get to, I would say maybe 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds, or maybe even just a second latency, that's mostly real time enough for your average user. But what's crazy, and that's we've had that on Cosmos chains that have fast finality for a while. But what's really powerful, I think, about exchanges like Hibachi is when you start pushing the boundary to 6 milliseconds. Not only does it feel exactly the Web2 UX, but also it's really powerful for the power users, right? The market makers, the algorithmic traders, the people, the big boys that basically, they want to have the freshest prices and not have their own orders be stale, and just that makes for a more efficient market and more efficient price discovery. So and that's only possible on Celestia because Celestia provides this decentralized backend, right, that has this lower consensus path, but it's very secure. And you can have in the front end a single sequencer, right? So you can kind of get the best of both worlds of hyper fast single sequencer confirmations like Web 2, but with a Web 3 backend of security. And I think that's super powerful. A last thing that's a user experience thing is if you traded on Uniswap, you had to have ETH in your wallet at all times. The coolest part about what you guys do is that there are no trading, there's no gas fees. It's just like Binance. You guys are paying the DA fees in the back end, but the user is not exposed to it. And that's exactly how Web3 apps should be. Having to hold Solana or ETH in your wallet as a user is just totally a terrible user experience, hands down. And again, by building a rollup, they can choose the fee model and they can make gas fees free. But you can't do that if you built a deck. Hello? You can't do that if you built your decks on a shared L1 that's already made that choice. So,
I mean, I think the general philosophy, I think, more broadly speaking, is you compute off-chain, but then you verify the compute on-chain, right? So, so which makes the design space a lot simpler. Because the moment you start doing every single transaction on-chain, it adds up, and yes, there are merits to doing that, right? But I don't think that is the kind of UX that will scale to every average user who's been used to using high fidelity apps like Uber or Robinhood or anything like that, right? So that's sort of where you want it to be as smooth as possible. And I think the easiest way to do that is to just move the compute off-chain. So gas or any of these things, these are not even things that a user need to think about.
Yeah.
And then at that point, like us paying DA fee is like using AWS, right? So you're basically paying for like data storage in many ways.
Yeah.
But then a user doesn't need to know like what I'm paying to AWS or what info I'm running, right? So that is really for the application or the operator. And then for those who really care to verify the actions, they could probably look into it if they really want to. But otherwise, you are building from a user first as a design principle, in which case this is likely the best way to do it.
Yeah. So then moving on to privacy, let's talk a bit about like why building on Celestia enables like privacy. And I mean, I'll let you go into that, but there's also like another example of a cool app that taps into privacy on Celestia called Pay, which is like a PAYY, Paylink, and it's a private stablecoin payment app. It's like feels like Venmo. And anyway, like what's so cool about them is like because they can build their own execution model, they built a privacy solution that's uses the same technology as Zcash, but instead of having like the Zeek token, it's a stable coin. And again, that's something like you can't build that. You could build, I guess, like Tornado Cash on Ethereum, but it's not the same thing. And it's not the same, like you can't tailor the user experience in the same way and get the same properties. So like having the control of the execution model gives you all these properties. So anyway, privacy is also a big aspect of Hibachi, and I think there's a similar story to be told. So let's talk about like why building on Celestia enables this.
Yeah, no, I think I'll give a context on how we ended up building the privacy solution for Celestia. So essentially, the idea here was essentially, how do you make sure that a user can exit without an exchange's permission, right? So that was the core problem we're trying to solve. Now, the way Hibachi works under the hood is you've got your central limit order book. That's where all the order matching happens. And then every X interval, what you do is you take the order book, all the transactions, you compute a ZK proof that basically proves that all the state updates that happened off-chain, they were done correctly, and then you're posting that proof onto the underlying L1, right? So where the deposits came from. Now, you can have a proof, right? But how do you know that this proof in fact corresponds to the right data set that was used to match user orders or trades, right? So what you could do obviously is just publish the data as it is, and then you can use the data, recreate the state, and verify the proof. Except if you do that, you're exposing everyone's transactions to everybody, and that is not ideal. So what we ended up doing is basically, instead of posting the data as it is, we basically post a encrypted blob onto Celestia, and then we post another ZK proof that basically proves that this encrypted data was derived from the data set that was used to generate the proof in the first place, right? And then we are currently working to build this model where each user has their own decryption key that they can use to decrypt their own transaction set and make sure that it is present in the Merkle tree that was used to derive the proof, right? So basically by doing so, what you're saying is any user can check their own balance was included in the proof, and the proof itself is correct. And if they want to withdraw their funds, they basically present that to the smart contract, and then they can withdraw funds, right? So right now, I think the escape hatch is like at the smart contract level is permissioned, but we are working with Celestia's team again to build something where escape mechanism is native to Celestia L1, so you don't have to write extra escape hatches. So I think that will just make it even easier, because at that point you can just natively escape from the Celestia without worrying about what the operator does in the first place, right? So you don't need to expect the operator to have any escape hatches. They'll be built natively at the Celestia level, so you can just exit from there, right? So that's something, I think you can tell us more about that, because I think I was talking to Nuke about it, and that's probably gonna come out next year. But that's sort of how the whole mechanism is set up, right? So by doing so, you're essentially able to hide user transactions, but then also still have guarantees of people being able to exit. And this is especially something that is required by like any large firms, market makers, traders, and so on, who don't want the activities to be public and desire that privacy from anyone just looking at all their actions.
Yeah. So I feel like you kind of rolled into the privacy part and then the data availability security part, because they are very much kind of related and almost you would think opposing each other. Where like the goal, right, is okay. Well, we have to make sure that this exchange is non-custodial. We're trying to avoid another FTX like thing where someone rugs your trading balance. But at the same time, the way you solve that is by publishing all the transactions publicly, so that everyone can reconstruct the state and exit if the operator, is malicious. But then, wait, you just published everything publicly. So
Correct.
then, now everyone's trades are total public knowledge. So it almost feels like it's an impossibility. Like how can you do data availability, but keep things secret that need to be secret? And I think this is a really elegant solution where each user has a way to get the data that's relevant to them to reconstruct their part of the state so that they can exit their thing. It's not a global, it's not like they can't, I guess everyone independently, if they work together, could reconstruct a global state, but that doesn't matter because it's just, the user only cares about their funds, right? And so it is self-custodial. It so preserves that property that we want. And that's why, just like a last little rant, is I feel like teams that are building single sequencer rollups get bashed by folks in the Solana community, for example. They say, oh, anything that's a single sequencer is by definition not decentralized. But the thing is, it's decentralized as a word is very vague, and it's reasoning you have to be more specific about what properties you're trying to get. And I think the properties that matter, especially for an exchange, and we've seen this over and over again, is non-custodial, right? And that way, it's how much trust do you have to put in the operator? That's a better, and what are the things that the operator can do to screw you over? And if you can limit those things as much as possible, so okay, the operator can't steal my funds, the operator can't mess with the ordering of my trades, all these things, you can one by one solve these problems, and then it's there's a single operator, but it's a totally decentralized system from the perspective of there's no trust. So anyway, I'm just I feel like single sequencing gets a bad rap for no reason, and it's actually our opportunity. So all the people who think that that's a bad idea, I think we'll lose, both from a product perspective, but also looking back, let's say 5 years from now, it'll be oh yeah, obviously that's actually is a good idea and not against crypto's values.
I mean, I think single sequencers are that's the best way to do it. so it doesn't matter what anyone says, right? So like you said, decentralization is pretty much a meme. So it's what aspect of the system are you trying to decentralize is what it really comes down to. Right? So at the system level, when things that are really, really critical, they do require a degree of decentralization, right? So, but for something like running an app, you don't need to decentralize every aspect of it, especially if you can prove your actions were done correctly. Right? So a good example is if you're running Uber, right? You don't need to decentralize Uber. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Right? So I think generally, I think decentralization makes sense where the technology itself is it's a blockchain on L1. It must be decentralized, right? But then if you have an application using that L1 for specific needs, that application itself doesn't need to be decentralized the same way the underlying L1 is. Right? So long as you can actually hold the operator accountable. So that's basically.
Yeah. So. And that's just to close the loop on that. A lot of people don't understand what data availability is all about, and really what it's all about is giving you, enabling the apps and the rollups, if they're a single sequencer, for example, to inherit a bunch of the properties from the L1, like censorship resistance, better property rights, the security of the execution of that app. And so that's why data availability is not a meme. It's like a very core thing for if you're building an app and you're claiming that it's actually secure in a Web3 way and has all these properties that we associate with Web3. Like if you just did a single sequencer thing, but you didn't post any DA layer, you could not really claim in the same way that it had the same level of verifiability and therefore property rights, like non-custodial features, as well as it might not be as like censorship resistant. You might not have an escape hatch or some other way to transact on the app if the sequencer is trying to censor you, for example. Anyway, okay, that's been really fun. I feel like we covered like why Celestia and why full stack apps. Maybe just to sort of wrap things up or move things in that direction. Tell us a little bit about your guys' roadmap. You guys have had, you guys launched the exchange. It's been live. You've been having people trading on it. You've been doing a rewards program that I think is wrapping up soon. So tell us about like the traction so far. What do you see in the near future and then maybe in the longer term future for Hibachi?
Oh, absolutely. So I think the platform went live around like June roughly. I mean, we launched like as a closed platform in January, but then really we went public with it around May when we launched the points program. So so far the traction has been like pretty positive, right? So today's the 5th consecutive day where we recorded like more than $100 million in trading volume.
No way.
So that's
5 days in a row, 100 million.
Don't quote me on that. I think